In just 42 seconds, one of Britain's most beloved actors completely dismantled a talk show host's reputation on live television, exposing behavior so shocking that it ended with Colin Firth being forcibly removed from the Graham Norton Show stage. What started as light banter turned into an absolute meltdown that has everyone talking. Before we dive into this explosive confrontation, make sure you subscribe to this channel for daily videos exposing Hollywood's darkest scandals. Hit that notification bell so you never miss the drama. Last night's episode of The Graham Norton Show was supposed to be a celebration. Colin Firth was there to promote his latest film, a passion project he'd spent 3 years developing about mental health awareness. The audience was buzzing with excitement as the legendary actor walked onto that famous red couch, waving to the crowd with his trademark modest smile. Graham Norton greeted him with his usual theatrical flair, shaking Firth's hand and gesturing for him to sit down. The studio lights were bright, the audience was clapping, and everything seemed perfectly normal. Norton began with what appeared to be a compliment about Firth's career, talking about his Oscar-winning performance in The King's Speech and his recent work. But then Norton said something that immediately changed the atmosphere in the room. "So Colin, you're here promoting yet another serious drama. Don't you ever just want to have fun? I mean, you've built quite the reputation for being, shall we say, intensely brooding. Some might even call it pretentious." The audience laughed nervously. Firth's smile faltered for just a moment before he composed himself. "I wouldn't call caring about meaningful stories pretentious, Graham," Firth replied calmly. "This film deals with suicide prevention. It's something I'm deeply passionate about." Norton leaned back in his chair with that familiar smirk. Right, very noble. But come on, mate. Every project with you is doom and gloom. The King's Speech, stuttering monarch. A single man, depressed professor. Even Bridget Jones was neurotic chaos. Don't you think audiences might want to see you smile occasionally? The audience went quiet. You could feel the tension starting to build. Firth shifted in his seat, his jaw tightening. "Graham, I think you're oversimplifying things quite a bit," Firth said, maintaining his composure but with a slight edge to his voice. "These stories matter to people. Mental health matters. Representation matters." Norton waved his hand dismissively. "Oh, here we go, with the representation speech. Look, I respect the work. Truly I do. But sometimes it feels like you take yourself a bit too seriously, doesn't it? I mean, you're an actor. You play dress-up for a living." That comment landed like a bomb. Several audience members gasped. Firth's expression hardened. "Play dress-up?" Firth repeated slowly. "Is that really how you view the craft?" Norton seemed to realize he'd crossed a line, but instead of backing down, he doubled down with a laugh. "Come on, Colin, don't be so sensitive. I'm just having a bit of fun. You actors always get so worked up about your craft. It's entertainment, not brain surgery." Firth sat forward, his voice becoming more firm. "You know what, Graham? I've sat through a lot of interviews in my career. Some hosts are brilliant. They actually prepare. They care about the work. Others just want sound bites and cheap laughs." "Oh, and which category do I fall into?" Norton asked with mock offense, playing to the audience who laughed uncomfortably. "I think you know," Firth said coldly. The temperature in the studio dropped about 20 degrees. Norton's smile became more forced, more plastic. "Well, someone's in a mood tonight," Norton said, turning to the audience for support. "Did we catch you on a bad day, Colin? Not enough tea in the trailer?" "No, Graham. You caught me on a day where I expected to have an actual conversation about a film that addresses teen suicide, and instead, I'm being mocked for caring about it." Firth shot back, his voice rising slightly. Norton's face flushed red. He wasn't used to guests pushing back like this on his own show. "Mocked? I'm not mocking you. I'm trying to have a lighthearted conversation. Maybe if you weren't so uptight about everything." "Uptight?" Firth interrupted, his voice sharp. "You just called my life's work playing dress-up and suggested that caring about mental health awareness is pretentious. And I'm the one who's uptight?" The audience was dead silent now. This wasn't the fun, boozy atmosphere the Graham Norton Show was known for. This was turning into something else entirely. Norton tried to regain control. "Look, Colin, I think you're overreacting a bit here. Let's talk about the film. What's it called again?" "You don't even know the title?" Firth asked incredulously. You invited me here to promote it, and you don't know what it's called? Norton laughed nervously, glancing at his notes. Of course I know it. I was just... No, you clearly didn't prepare. Firth cut him off again. You brought me on here to be the butt of jokes, didn't you? That's what this was supposed to be. Get the serious actor. Make him look stuffy. Get some laughs. That's not fair, Norton protested, but his voice lacked conviction. Isn't it? Firth challenged. Because from where I'm sitting, you haven't asked me a single substantive question about the film, about the message we're trying to send to struggling teenagers, about the suicide prevention organizations we're partnering with. Nothing. Just mockery. Norton's face was now completely red. He was losing control of his own show, and he knew it. I don't appreciate being lectured on my own program, Colin. I've been doing this for years. I know how to conduct an interview. Really? Because this is one of the worst I've ever experienced, Firth said bluntly. The audience gasped again. This was unprecedented. Guests didn't speak to Graham Norton like this. Norton stood up from his chair, clearly rattled. Okay, well, if you're so unhappy with how this is going, maybe we should just move on to the next segment. Maybe we should, Firth agreed, but he didn't move. But before we do, I want to say something directly to your audience. Norton looked panicked. Colin, I don't think... I'm going to say it anyway, Firth interrupted, turning to face the audience directly. If any of you are struggling with your mental health, if you're feeling hopeless or alone, please reach out. Talk to someone. There are resources available. Your life matters, your story matters, and don't let anyone make you feel like caring about these issues is pretentious or uptight or overly serious. The audience began to applaud, slowly at first, then building. Norton stood there awkwardly, completely unsure of what to do. That's what I came here to talk about, Firth continued, his voice passionate now. Not to be your comedy punching bag, Graham. I came here to use whatever platform I have to help people. And instead, you turned it into a joke. Norton tried to interject. Colin, I think you're being a bit dramatic. Dramatic? Firth's voice rose sharply. A teenager takes their own life every few hours in this country, Graham. This film is trying to change that conversation, to break down stigmas, to show people it's okay to ask for help. And you're calling me dramatic for being upset that you're treating it like it's nothing? I never said it was nothing, Norton defended weakly. You didn't have to say it, Firth countered. Your entire approach said it for you. The eye rolls, the dismissive comments, the complete lack of preparation. You made it abundantly clear that you don't take any of this seriously. Norton's face was now a deep crimson. He was visibly shaking. Whether from anger or embarrassment wasn't clear. You know what, Colin? I don't need to stand here and take this from you. This is my show. I decide how the interviews go. And that's exactly the problem, Firth said. Standing up now, too. They were face to face across the coffee table. You think because it's your show, you can treat your guests however you want, mock their work, belittle what they care about, all for a cheap laugh. Get off my stage, Norton said suddenly, his voice cold. The audience gasped. Firth stared at him in disbelief. Excuse me? Firth said. You heard me. Get off my stage. If you're going to come on here and insult me, insult my show, then you can leave, Norton declared, pointing toward the exit. Firth laughed bitterly. You're actually kicking me off for calling out your behavior? I'm kicking you off for being disrespectful, Norton shot back. I'm being disrespectful? Firth's voice was incredulous now. Graham, do you hear yourself? You spent the last 15 minutes mocking my career, dismissing important issues, and now you're playing the victim? I said get off my stage, Norton shouted, his voice cracking slightly. The audience was completely silent. Some people looked shocked, others uncomfortable. A few were filming on their phones. Firth took a deep breath, clearly trying to maintain his composure. You know what? Fine. I'll leave. I don't want to be here anyway. Not if this is how you treat people who are trying to do something meaningful. Oh, spare me the martyr act, Norton spat. You actors and your causes. So self-righteous. That was the final straw. Firth's eyes flashed with anger. Self-righteous? Firth repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. I lost a close friend to suicide 3 years ago, Graham. That's why I made this film. That's why I care so bloody much about this issue. But sure, call me self-righteous for trying to prevent other families from going through what we went through." The audience was dead silent. Norton's face went pale. He clearly hadn't known this. I didn't know," Norton stammered. "Of course you didn't know," Firth said, his voice breaking slightly with emotion. "Because you didn't bother to prepare. You didn't bother to ask. You just assumed you could make me the joke of the evening." Norton opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came out. For once, the usually quick-witted host was speechless. "You want me off your stage? Fine. I'm going," Firth said, unbuttoning his jacket. "But you should be ashamed of yourself, Graham. You had an opportunity tonight to use your platform for good, to have a real conversation about something that affects millions of people. And instead, you chose mockery." "Colin, wait!" Norton finally found his voice, but it was too late. "No," Firth cut him off firmly. "I'm done. I hope you're happy with your cheap laughs, because they came at the expense of a message that could have saved lives." Firth turned and walked toward the exit. The audience didn't know whether to applaud or stay silent. The tension was suffocating. Norton called after him desperately. "Colin, please, let's just sit down and start over." Firth stopped at the edge of the stage and turned back. "Start over? Graham, the problem isn't how the interview started. The problem is you. The problem is your attitude, your lack of respect, your inability to take anything seriously unless it fits into your comedy bit." "That's not true," Norton protested weakly. "Isn't it?" Firth challenged. "Tell me, Graham, when was the last time you had a serious conversation on this show? When was the last time you actually listened to a guest instead of waiting for your next punchline?" Norton's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. The cameras were still rolling, capturing every excruciating moment. "That's what I thought," Firth said quietly. "You've been doing this so long, you've forgotten that real people with real stories sit on that couch. We're not just here for your entertainment." A few audience members actually clapped at that. Norton looked devastated. "And another thing," Firth continued, clearly unleashing everything he'd been holding back. "You want to know why I choose serious roles? Why I care about meaningful stories? Because art has the power to change minds, to open hearts, to make people feel less alone. That's not pretentious, Graham. That's purpose. That's the whole bloody point." Norton tried again. "Colin, I'm sorry, okay? I didn't mean to—" "You didn't mean to what?" Firth interrupted. "Didn't mean to mock me? Didn't mean to dismiss mental health advocacy? Didn't mean to completely disrespect me and everyone watching who might be struggling? Which part didn't you mean, Graham?" The host had no answer. He stood there, defeated, his show falling apart around him. "You know what the worst part is?" Firth said, his voice softer now but somehow more cutting. "You're actually talented, Graham. You could use this platform to do real good. But instead, you hide behind jokes and alcohol and celebrity gossip. It's cowardly. Now that's unfair." Norton finally found some fight in him. "You don't know anything about me or what I've been through." "You're right. I don't," Firth agreed. "Because you don't let anyone see the real you. It's all performance, all surface. And that's fine. That's your choice. But don't drag me into your shallow end and then get upset when I refuse to play along." The two men stared at each other across the studio. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity. Finally, Norton spoke, his voice cold. "Security, please escort Mr. Firth from the building." The audience erupted in shocked murmurs. Firth laughed in disbelief. "You're actually having me removed by security?" Firth asked. "For what? Telling the truth?" "For disrupting my show," Norton stated firmly, trying to reclaim some authority. "Your show disrupted itself the moment you decided mockery was more important than humanity." Firth shot back. Two security guards appeared from the wings, looking extremely uncomfortable with the situation. "Gentlemen," Firth addressed them calmly, "you don't need to escort me. I'm leaving willingly. I have no desire to spend another second on this stage." He turned back to Norton one final time. "I hope you watch this back, Graham. I hope you see what I saw tonight. A talented host who's lost his way, who values laughs over connection, who's forgotten why he started doing this in the first place." Norton's jaw was clenched tight. He looked like he wanted to respond but couldn't find the words. "And for the record," Firth added, "I don't regret a single serious role I've ever taken. I don't regret caring about things that matter. The only thing I regret is agreeing to come on this show tonight." With that, Colin Firth turned and walked off the stage with his head held high. The audience sat in stunned silence, unsure how to react to what they'd just witnessed. Norton stood alone on his stage, the lights bright and unforgiving, his usual confidence completely shattered. He tried to speak, to address the audience, but his voice cracked. Let's go to commercial," he finally managed to say. But the damage was done. In less than 20 minutes, one of Britain's most beloved talk shows had imploded on live television. Graham Norton, the master of celebrity interviews, had been completely dismantled by a guest who refused to play by his rules. As Firth disappeared through the studio doors, you could see him pause for just a moment, take a deep breath, and then continue walking. He'd said what he needed to say. He'd stood up for what he believed in. And he'd exposed a truth that many in the industry had known for years but were too afraid to voice. The Graham Norton Show had built its reputation on fun, frivolity, and celebrity banter. But tonight, that formula had backfired spectacularly. When confronted with real emotion, real passion, and real purpose, the show's shallow foundation crumbled. Backstage, crew members watched in silence as Firth collected his things from the dressing room. No one quite knew what to say. Some wanted to apologize. Others wanted to shake his hand. But everyone gave him space. In the studio, Norton was trying to compose himself during the commercial break. His producers were frantically trying to figure out how to salvage the rest of the show. Should they address what just happened? Should they pretend it didn't occur? Should they pull the entire episode? But those decisions didn't matter to Colin Firth anymore. He'd made his point. He'd defended his work, his values, and most importantly, the cause he'd come to discuss. If the Graham Norton Show couldn't handle a genuine conversation about mental health, about purpose, about meaning, then it wasn't a show worth being on. As Firth walked through the BBC building toward the exit, he could hear the audience noise from various studios. Laughter, applause, music, all the sounds of entertainment. But tonight had been about something more than entertainment. It had been about truth. At the security desk, the guard looked up as Firth approached. "Leaving already, Mr. Firth?" the guard asked, surprised. "Show's not over yet." Firth smiled sadly. "Oh, it's over. Trust me." He signed out, pushed through the doors, and stepped into the cold London night. Behind him, chaos reigned in Studio One. Ahead of him, the city lights sparkled with promise. He'd been kicked off the Graham Norton Show, but he'd never felt more certain that he'd done the right thing. The confrontation that unfolded tonight wasn't just about a talk show gone wrong. It was about an industry that often values entertainment over substance, laughs over truth, performance over authenticity. Colin Firth had drawn a line in the sand, and in doing so, he'd reminded everyone watching that some things are more important than playing along. As he climbed into the waiting car, Firth didn't look back at the BBC building. He didn't need to. He'd said everything that needed saying. Graham Norton would have to live with the consequences of his actions, and the footage of tonight's disaster would speak for itself. The driver pulled away from the curb, and Firth finally allowed himself to relax. His phone was already buzzing with messages, his agent, his publicist, friends who'd been watching live. But he ignored them all for now. Tonight wasn't about damage control or public relations. Tonight was about standing up for something real in a world that often felt increasingly fake. Back in the studio, Graham Norton was trying to continue the show with his remaining guests, but the energy was gone. Everyone in that room had witnessed something uncomfortable, something raw, something that couldn't be laughed away or glossed over with charm. The incident would dominate headlines, spark think pieces, and divide opinion. Some would say Firth overreacted, that he should have been more professional, that he shouldn't have made such a scene. Others would applaud his courage, his authenticity, his refusal to be diminished. But none of that mattered. As Colin Firth's car disappeared into the London night, he'd come to the Graham Norton Show to talk about something important, something that could help people, something that meant everything to him. When that opportunity was turned into mockery, he refused to stay silent. When he was told to leave, he left with dignity. And in those 42 seconds that started everything, when Graham Norton made that first dismissive comment about pretentious drama, neither man could have predicted how completely the evening would unravel. But it did unravel, thread by thread, joke by joke, until there was nothing left but raw honesty and uncomfortable truth. The Graham Norton Show had finally met a guest who wouldn't play the game, who wouldn't sacrifice meaning for laughs, who wouldn't be anyone other than exactly who he was. And in that collision of comedy and conviction, only one man walked away with his integrity intact. Colin Firth had been kicked off the Graham Norton Show, but as his car merged into London traffic, it was clear who had really lost tonight. And it wasn't the man in the back seat, finally breathing freely, knowing he'd stood up for what mattered most.